In this video, I'm going to be talking about camera lenses. Give my thoughts, my opinions on them as I actually go through the 5 lenses, yes, my lens lineup for my camera, which is the Sony A7 III. This is a camera that's actually approaching, I believe it's its 3rd birthday. Looking at my memories on Facebook about looking to upgrade, I believe this is almost 3 years old. I bought it a couple of months after it was released, but I believe in April, March, it's going to be about been available for about 3 years. An awesome camera that I will never regret getting. It's, mirrorless is changing the world. Regardless of whatever Sony have released since, and I have to say the Alpha 1 looks extremely exciting. Sony are making good cameras, and the A7 III is still an excellent camera. So what I'm going to do is talk about my lenses, because people have obviously their different own opinions about lenses, whether they prefer primes, whether they prefer zooms or telephoto lenses, and everybody has their own opinion on what makes the perfect lens lineup, whether that be due to budget constraints or just simply the tasks and type of photography that they do. The first lens that I'm going to talk about is the Sony 28-70 f3.5 to 5.6. This is one of the kit lenses available with the Sony A7 III. This is one that I got. I say that one of the kit lenses because I believe the 24-105 f4 was also available in as a kit lens, so-called, with the A7 III, but I think this was the most popular bundle, or certainly one of the most available bundles, and the one I got was the A7 III with the 28-70 3.5 to 5.6. Unfortunately, a lot of people seem to have an unjustified aversion, in my opinion, to kit lenses. I don't know why. I think lens technology is moving forward, and I think in a few years it's not even going to be a so-called issue. It's not really an issue, to be honest. If people get, I understand if you're moving from camera to camera in the same ecosystem, and you may get a second copy of that lens, or you may have already had the lens and decided, lens doesn't work for me, it's not for my type of photography, or it doesn't suit me, or whatever. You've decided, okay, I've had to buy the bundle because of where I live, or because of the availability of the camera. It was available in this bundle, so I got the bundle, but I don't want the lens anymore because I've already experienced it and it's not for me. I understand it, but to just dismiss it, I don't feel that's justified. And I've even heard it lately. I mean, then again, if you look through reviews of any of the lenses that I talk about in this video, some people will say that you'll see opinions ranging from they're excellent to they're terrible, avoid. But for me, this lens, I've gotten some really good photos from the 28-70. I photograph in RAW, and I do edit images, obviously, because you kind of have to process RAWs anyway. But I don't think the criticism of that lens is really justified. It was the only lens that I had for a good while, so I had to use it, and it was a good lens. It served me well, and said I'll show you. Obviously you see samples of it. I thought it was a pretty good lens. So, like I said, going forward, I don't think any so-called kit lens issues will be an issue going forward. Lens technology, whatever brand you're talking about, is improving all the time, and so very soon it will be, oh, what lens did you go with it, rather than, oh, you got a kit lens with it. Just my opinion. The second lens that I'll talk about very quickly, Sony f1.8 50mm. Again, these are all mostly budget lenses because of my financial constraints. A nifty 50. Everybody's got, or most people have got a nifty 50 in their lens lineup. Again, I got this more inexpensive version for nighttime photography. I used it for a little bit of walking around, but more lower light stuff. Haven't been able to. I'll be showing you samples for every lens that I'm talking about. Haven't been able to get some recent nighttime examples, unfortunately, with this lens because of the weather, because of the current situation. A couple of times I did go out, the weather turned, and really wasn't able to really stay. It was quite stormy. Wasn't really able to stay out to get lower light nighttime photos with it. But going forward, I do want to do some prime photography, some wide angle, and some 50mm and slightly wider prime photos. So that's what I will use this for going forward. And when I can get back to doing some lower light nighttime photos, this will be one of the lenses that I use. The third lens that I will talk about is another wide angle. It's again a really inexpensive lens, Samyang 24mm f2.8. It's also available as the brand Rokinon. I think they're kind of basically interchangeable. It's just different branding on the lenses. But I believe it's all the big same company. This one again I bought because for slightly wider photography, 24mm rather than the kit 28 that I used to walk around in very general photography. So I got the Samyang 24mm, again budget wise, budget concerns at the time. Haven't really used this a lot, to be honest. This has been sitting on the shelf quite a bit, which is unfortunate. I didn't mean to do that, but I haven't been out a lot lately anyway. But when I get, especially in the summer, and I do want to do more wide angle photography, using primes, and I'm more of a zoom photographer. I prefer zoom lenses. I just kind of like to be able to change the composition, change the viewpoint of what I'm looking at. So when I do get back to doing prime, maybe I'll do videos on that with my GoPro that I have. I'm going to do a GoPro Hero 8 review within the next few weeks, hopefully, once I get a little bit more footage and test it out a little bit, do a little bit of footage things. But this Samyang 24mm is quite good. The penultimate lens that I'm going to talk about is the Tamron 28-75. This is an excellent lens. This really is. This actually, to be honest, this may be my favourite lens that I have. I'm not really looking to add a huge amount really to my lens lineup. Not at the moment. Going forward, it's very difficult to keep justifying it financially, and I've got a few lenses here, to be honest, that kind of cross over between each other, especially the Tamron and the Samyang. I mean, this is 28mm, which is roughly the same focal distance, focal length at 2.8, and this also f2.8, so there's a little bit of crossover, but again, prime zoom, slight difference. This Tamron lens, the 28-75, has been extremely popular. It's been a major hit. Tamron came up with some really good lenses recently. Some from, I think it's like 17-28, and also 28-75, and the 28-200s raved about. Tamron really have been putting out some excellent Sony lenses for Sony cameras. So this actually might be, I think this might be the lens that I think is the best quality lens as well. The samples that you'll see have been taken from fairly recent walk from photography video, same kind of photos, but unfortunately, again, I haven't been able to get out much, but the quality of the photos that I've gotten from this lens has been excellent. The real reason why I bought the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 was, I'll be honest, professional wrestling photography. I do fan photos at wrestling events, and I wanted to use this for those events. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any events for now close to a year, and it may not be for a little while, unfortunately, by the way that it looks. I'm hoping sooner than later, but this is the lens that I will be using in the lower light, because it's very small venues that the local promotion that I go to uses. So I want to use the Tamron F28 28 to 75 f2.8, which is great because it's a constant aperture lens, so I can use it in lower light situations. I'm not going to go and review the whole lens, but it's an excellent lens, and I think, again, probably my favourite lens, and I think the lens that I get the best results from. And I want to do a little bit more testing. I've got a couple of videos in mind to do. It's just a case of me getting off my butt and doing them. But honestly, out of the 5 lenses that I have, probably my favourite one is the Tamron 28 to 75. Not that my viewpoint is worth a huge deal, but for what I bought, the little lens lineup and little experience that I've got, certainly it's my favourite lens to use currently. I have been using it as a bit of a walk around lens, as you've seen the samples. It's kind of been relegated to a walk around lens because of no wrestling. But even though, like I said, looking at the photos that I've been getting from it, excellent lens. The last lens that I'm covering is the most recent lens that I bought. I ummed and ahed. To be honest, I've been looking for a more telephoto lens. As obviously as I've taken you through, the 28 to 75 is the longest focal length lens that I have, to 75mm. That's the longest focal length, the furthest focal length that I have in the lenses. So I've been looking to get a more telephoto lens. Obviously, many of them are very expensive. If I do add to my lens lineup within the next year or so, it will probably be a more telephoto lens. I did, however, and add several options recently in terms of telephoto-ish or telephoto lenses. There's several options out there, but again, due to budget, due to various things, I ended up going for a lens which I've only had for a very short time, only used a few times, and that is the Sony FE f3.5 to 6.3 24 to 240. This is the lens that I've gone for. I ummed and ahed about which lens to go for, whether it was to go for the 100 to 400 Sigma, keep saving up for that, which would take a long time, to get the 28 to 200 from Tamron, which does sound like a good option, and I kind of put off getting this lens because the 24 to 240, the design of it at least, is about 5 years old. So I kind of ummed and ahed, but then I saw it quite cheap, and this is not a plug, it's just simply where I got it, on Wex Photographic. They've got a great YouTube channel as well where they do reviews and talk about photography stuff. And so I bought this thing wanting to get, with this, the length of the lens actually is not huge either. So I kind of wanted to go for a decent length telephoto lens, and I saw this relatively cheap on Wex as a used one, previously enjoyed one I should really say, because that's what tends to be the term nowadays. Only bought it fairly recently, so only I've been able to get a few sample images of a couple of trips out. But 28 to 240, that is kind of the focal range that I want to use as a walk around lens, as kind of some of these general public events that I like to go to. I like to go to events, unfortunately, that are not on right now, which is hugely frustrating for me. Events like the Flower and Food Festival, the Museum of Transport, Dundee Museum of Transport Open Day, to go to the street markets and places like that, the general public events, the West Fest and things like that. I want a telephoto lens that I can zoom in a little bit and take some photos, and without getting in people's way, etc. So I was looking for that, and I ended up, because of the price, because it was quite cheap actually, very very good condition, but it was relatively cheap or inexpensive on Wex, so I bought it. 24 to 240. Again, like the 28 to 70, and other lenses that I've talked about briefly. You look through reviews of this lens. I saw a German guy called Frank Woldorf, I think his name is. I need to find his name, but he'd done a couple of videos with this lens in places like New York, going to Staten Island, and he, kind of convinced me watching that video to get this lens. One last thing I will say about lenses and lens lineups. It's up to each individual what lenses suit them, what type of photography you're doing, what situations you're going to be in, and what your preferences are. Like I said, whether you prefer primes or zooms, what budget you have, everything in your situation is what you must consider. Yes, there's lots of advice out there, there's lots of people who give their penny's worth, but in the end, it's up to each individual what they go after, what lenses they buy. And whatever lenses suit you better is your perfect lens lineup. Some lenses are made for specific situations, which annoys me. Like 24 to 240, that's not made for low light situations, but people will still try and get them to say, people will try and nag or kind of put down this lens because it's not made for low light. Not every lens is made for low light situations. A lot of lenses, general lenses, are made for photographing in the daylight. So keep that in mind, but like I said, it's up to each individual because everybody's perfect lens lineup may be different from the next person's.